I recently did a video on the fall of Atari after the 2600, and it had a strong emphasis on the 5200 era right before the video game crash. I did continue on to mention up through the 90s, although briefly, and felt pretty confident that I had covered it all. Some parts better than others, but the key points were touched on. The comments section was interesting for that video, as people noticed I didn't cover the Jaguar and Links stuff very much. A few other people didn't like that I stated that Atari was destined to fail, when their own ineptitude caused their own downfall. Both fair points, but there was one comment that stood out to me. One person who said something along the lines of, "What about when Hasbro owned Atari?" That single comment made me realize that in my mind, Atari ends with the sale to the hard drive manufacturer, JTS, in the mid-90s. But it doesn't end there. We all know that Atari popped back up under Infogrames. But what about the space in between? For most of us, it literally goes, Atari Corp folds and sells off, ? Infogrames buys Atari. So in this video, I want to spread the word of that middle time. I want to spread the word of Hasbro and their time with Atari. A period of time that the new Atari even skipped over in their 50th collection. And with the help of a former Hasbro employee from the time that Hasbro owned Atari, I think we can give the best look of that time yet. The comment was from one Jason Hill, and after a little digging, I was able to verify his employment with Hasbro. He was a PR manager during their ownership of Atari, and more importantly, he was an advocate for Atari within the company. So much of this information is thanks to him, and the interview we did that you can now find on the channel. Hasbro purchased Atari from JTS in February of 1998. Now, Hasbro had previously opened their interactive video game division about 3 years earlier in 1995, and began publishing games based on their board game properties. But with the acquisition of Atari, they had a known name in the industry that was associated with the simple, easy-to-understand classics of yesteryear, and they planned on leveraging the name and IPs for their Games.com website and brand. I think it can be assumed that Hasbro's intentions with Games.com, and Atari in general, was to have browser-based versions of their games on perhaps a monthly subscription thing? But according to Jason Hill, there really wasn't much understanding on how to make something like Games.com work. And it's really unknown if it was even going to be subscription-based or what they were going to do with it at all.
Thing is, remember I told you in 1995 they picked up this domain, Games.com.
Yeah.
Atari was to have been heavily featured on that service if it had gotten fully functional. I don't know if y'all remember the .com bubble and what happened during that time.
Yeah.
Atari, Hasbro dumped about $100 million into Games.com.
Oh, wow.
Do y'all remember the South Park episode Underpants Gnomes?
Yeah.
You had, collect underpants, unknown sinner profits.
Yep.
Well, the Games.com was kind of the same thing. They dumped $100 million into it, and they didn't really know how they were going to make the money off of it. In 2000, 2001, that was, it was pretty cutting edge stuff. And like I said, not everybody knew how that was going to work out and how you were going to really make that model work. It's better now, but back in 2000, 2001, not so good. These were all supposed to be a really casual pick up and play games, and Atari would have fit perfectly into this, as you can imagine. And that's one reason they had bought all the IPs, is that with Games.com, this it would have been perfect.
Their plan was very much missing that all-important middle step of, providing something of value for intended profit. But even with Hasbro's Games.com service being poorly planned or capitalized on, Hasbro began to release products on their Atari brands and IPs. They released games under the name of Atari, such as Pong the Next Level, Centipede, Missile Command, and Breakout. These games would mostly be released on the PlayStation and Dreamcast, and most would get average reviews from the gaming media. But as Jason divulges, the original programmers and designers of games like Breakout and Centipede weren't always keen on what Hasbro was doing.
And we got a little bit of pushback of you're ruining the game because you're updating it. You always get that whenever you do something to it. And again, we had some pushback even from some old Atari designers, which I would meet out at Classic Gaming Expo. They go, "Why are you trying to mess up my game? Because it really didn't need fixing. It was fine the way it was." And of course, we're going, "Yeah, but nobody wants to buy it the way it was because they already bought it 5 times."
It's clear that the old guard from the original iteration of Atari still felt strong about the games that they birthed. But I agree with Hasbro and Jason here, as we were entering the 2000s. These games needed something new and fresh to succeed in the market. The retro gaming movement wasn't a thing yet, and even if it was, you can't just keep releasing the same thing untouched over and over. Changes needed to be made, and I think Hasbro did a good job in doing things respectfully, usually. Hasbro Interactive had also obtained rights to produce games for properties like Frogger and Pac-Man, and one would think this would be a perfect fit for a company with a brand like Atari. After all, it was these original arcade properties that helped to make Atari a big deal in the 70s and 80s, and vice versa. There was a built-in relationship, and Atari was sort of Hasbro's retro brand.
Swampy's Revenge, I think, came out under Atari. A couple of others. The Namco licenses did not. They came under, even though there were classic gaming licenses, they came out under Hasbro Interactive. Apparently, Atari didn't treat Namco very well when in the early 80s. And Namco was not going to allow them to come, like Pac-Man was never coming out under Atari again.
Right.
So you had things like Pac-Man Adventure in Time, the Dig Dug update. There was a Pac-Man plane update.
I'm not sure exactly what happened, but it's a shame. The brands were so closely associated in gaming's history, and even today people think Atari when they think Frogger, etc. Outside of releasing the games and IPs for the PlayStation and a few other consoles of the time, Hasbro played a pivotal role with certain Atari platforms. The Atari Jaguar and Links had come and gone, being discontinued and seemingly forgotten with the sale of Atari to JTS all those years ago. But when Hasbro acquired Atari, companies like Telegames and other independent programmers were begging for the rights and ability to legally release stuff for the Jaguar and Links. And Hasbro probably saw little to no value in these failed products from the company's past owners. So Hasbro made the Jaguar and Links open platforms, meaning that anybody could legally sell software on them. They also made what they had available information-wise public as well. Again,
The fact that we got both the Lynx and the Jaguar into the public domain during that time, if Hasbro didn't do another thing, at least they did that.
That was huge.
I'm hoping that fans for the future will appreciate that, at least from Hasbro.
This allowed for incredible software to be released like Protector, Skyhammer, and Worms on the Jaguar. We all owe Hasbro's time of owning Atari a debt of gratitude for those titles. As the 90s wrapped up, the new millennium started, and it became apparent to many that the dot-com bubble was bursting. We saw the fall of many internet ideas like Pet.com, and Hasbro's Gaming.com seemed to be yet another victim. Hasbro had sunk a small fortune into getting Games.com going, and Atari was to play a big part in that.
They weren't seeing any return, and it was at that point they decided to sell off to Infogrames. And they ended up selling everything, including the Atari brand, for about $100 million. January of 2021, I think, was the year. Yeah, they wanted to get out with their money, get their money back and get out of the business.
And so, with the sale to Infogrames, Atari's time with Hasbro was finished. Many people have found it to be a bleak, forgettable time for the brand. But really, I think it was probably the best case scenario for Atari at the time. According to Jason Hill, who so graciously provided us with that interview and helped with fact-checking on this video, Hasbro at least had some reverence for the Atari brand, even if they didn't totally understand what they had acquired.
Their legal department found out I had been an Atari historian and kept coming to me going, "Do we own this IP?" I kid you not. It was an odd thing. And what happened is that, over time after Infogrames took over the company, really they only wanted the IP. They did not want the studio. They did not want the people. So over time, they got rid of everybody. I lasted until November of 2022. Others lasted a little longer. Apparently, though, legal kept coming over to PR going, "Do we own this?" And I'm going, "Y'all always told us this." I go, "No, Jason always told you that." So, 2002. Okay. They were not absolutely sure what they had.
Gotcha.
Well, it's very confusing.
They released new, updated versions of Atari's IPs on the latest platforms of the time. It gave fans of Atari and the properties something to enjoy and play. I myself loved Pong the Next Level, and because of that game, I knew that Atari still existed in some form. But furthermore, by Hasbro listening to what the fans and community wanted, they ended up releasing the Jaguar and Lynx into the public domain. They could have greedily held on to it and refused, as there was little benefit to them releasing it. But thanks to people like Jason Hill within the company, who truly loved Atari and what the brand represented, we got truly incredible events and Jaguar and the Links becoming open platforms. And even though it didn't work out, Hasbro did have big plans for Atari and their games. So Hasbro sold Atari to Infogrames in order to recover some of their investment. And we all know how things transpired from there. Infogrames wanted the name recognition in my opinion, and cared very little for what Atari had represented. They did the complete opposite of what Hasbro wanted to do. Under Infogrames, Atari released games like The Matrix, Driver 3, Alone in the Dark, and other unrelated properties. Atari was less Atari than ever, and just another gaming company fighting for space in the market. But that's a story for another time. I want to thank Jason Hill for providing the Atari Network with the interview, as well as fact-checking and helping with the script, etc. He is awesome and loves Atari just as much as the rest of us. And if you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel a bunch, and we put out 2 new videos every week. And speaking of helping the channel, I'd like to thank these classy Atarians for becoming Patreons. Patreon members get exclusive videos and behind-the-scenes stuff. It's $5 a month and helps immensely. Okay guys, I'm the 7800 Pro Gamer, freshly enlightened Atari fan turned Hasbro fan, and I'd like to thank you all for watching the video. And remember, stay classy Atarians.